You've been lied to. Not by a person, not by a single book, but by an entire culture that made a silent decision. That culture decided, somewhere along the way, that success has an expiration date, a deadline most people don't even know exists. If you haven't built something significant by 30, launched your company by 35, you're already behind, already losing, or retired wealthy by 40, the culture says you've somehow already lost the race, game over before it truly began. Here's what nobody tells you. The race you're panicking about? Most people you admire weren't even at the starting line yet. Not at your age, not even close. And yet, they became the names, the legends, the stories everyone references today. This isn't a feel-good pep talk. This is a documented pattern backed by history and behavioral economics. Real evidence. It's backed by the quiet, unglamorous stories of the people whose names you know. Stories rarely told in full. And once you see this pattern clearly, truly clearly, it will permanently change the way you think about time and ambition. It will reshape what you believe is actually still possible for your life from this moment forward, starting right now. Scroll through any social media feed for 5 minutes, you'll find a 24-year-old self-made millionaire right there. A 28-year-old startup founder who exited for 8 figures. Another one, 29. They're everywhere on your screen. A 31-year-old who retired early and now teaches you how to do the same, for a monthly fee, of course. And if you're 42 or 51 or 63 watching all of that, you feel it. Something quiet, something heavy. That quiet, creeping sense that you missed something, that the window closed while you weren't paying attention to it, that the best chapters of your story are already behind you, written, finished, and you can't go back to rewrite them. That feeling is real. The emotion is valid, but the premise behind it, that premise is the lie you were sold. The truth is, the loudest success stories are almost never the most representative ones. They're the rare exceptions, the outliers. We celebrate the anomalies, the Zuckerbergs, the teenage prodigies, the overnight sensations because they're dramatic, because they're thrilling to watch. Because they make good headlines, because they feed a fantasy most people secretly want to believe is still available to them. But the actual data on wealth, achievement, and meaningful contribution tells a very different story, a quieter one, a slower one. One that most people, busy, distracted, discouraged, never stop long enough to hear. And that silence costs them everything. Let's start with a number that might surprise you. The average age of a first-time millionaire in the United States is not 30. It's not even 40. According to multiple studies on American wealth building, the median age at which individuals first cross that threshold sits in the mid to late 50s. Read that again. Let it land. Most millionaires didn't get there young, not even close. They got there slowly, steadily, through decades of disciplined decisions, compounding investments, and accumulated expertise built year after quiet year. They didn't go viral, they didn't raise a Series A. They showed up over and over long after the crowd moved on, long after everyone else had moved on to celebrating someone else, someone younger, someone louder, someone who looked more like the fantasy. And here's the part that makes this even more fascinating. Most of these people live in ordinary neighborhoods, completely unremarkable from the outside. They drive sensible cars. They don't look wealthy. They don't perform wealth. But they are wealthy, quietly, privately, sustainably so. Because they played a long game in a culture that worships the short one, patience, in a world addicted to speed and spectacle. This phenomenon even has a name. Researchers call it the millionaire next door profile. It's more common than most people ever realize. And it fundamentally challenges the way most people think about what financial success actually looks like in real life, in practice. But wealth is just one lens. Let's talk about the one thing that arguably matters even more, the courage to begin at any age. Consider the fashion industry, one of the most image-obsessed, youth-obsessed industries on the planet, a world built on young faces. Christian Dior launched his iconic fashion house in 1947. He was 41 years old when he made that defining move. The man who would reshape Western fashion entirely, whose name still appears on bags, perfumes, and runways around the world today. He didn't make his defining move until most people today would consider his prime years already long gone. 41, just beginning. Move to the world of consumer beverages. Red Bull, a brand synonymous with youth culture, extreme sports, and raw energy worldwide. Red Bull was founded by Dietrich Mateschitz, who launched the company in 1987. He was 43 years old at launch. He didn't invent the drink, he saw something others missed and had the patience and experience to execute at scale. The maturity he had accumulated over decades in corporate marketing wasn't a liability. That maturity was the product itself. Now consider perhaps the most famous late start story in American business history, a man who failed more times than most people attempt anything. Harlan Sanders, Colonel Sanders, spent decades working as a lawyer, a steamboat operator, an insurance salesman, and a gas station owner. He was in his late 60s when Kentucky Fried Chicken became a national expansion. Late 60s. Most would call that retirement age. He was well into his 70s when the brand became a true household name. His most consequential chapter still ahead of him. The same pattern appears in manufacturing. Adi Dassler, founder of Adidas, didn't establish the company under that name until 1949. He was in his 50s after years of building, losing, and rebuilding from scratch. Experience forged through failure, not despite it. The brand that would define athletic culture worldwide wasn't born from youthful inspiration. It was born from decades of hard-earned craft. And then there's Henry Ford, a name so embedded in American mythology that most people completely forget the actual timeline behind it. Ford founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. He was 40 years old, 40, when he changed the world forever. The man who transformed transportation, industrialized manufacturing, and reshaped the American economy didn't change the world until 40, not before. Most people today would consider that their window of opportunity already closing. Ford considered it his opening act, his real beginning. This isn't coincidence. There is a real reason these stories cluster around middle age and beyond, and it has nothing to do with luck. There's a concept worth understanding here, the critical difference between intelligence and wisdom. Two things most people treat as the same. Intelligence can be acquired from books. You can read your way to knowledge. You can study your way to competence. That part is accessible. But wisdom, the kind that lets you navigate ambiguity, read people accurately, and absorb failure without breaking, that is different entirely. The kind of wisdom that lets you see around corners others can't, that only comes from lived experience, and lived experience takes time. The founders and builders who started later weren't slower, they were deeper. They had context that no classroom can manufacture or accelerate. They'd seen enough cycles to recognize patterns. They'd failed enough times to truly understand what failure actually teaches when you let it. They'd developed the emotional regulation that young ambition, however brilliant, however energetic, so often lacks in its earliest and loudest stages. There's a reason we age wine. There's a reason great chefs let certain dishes slow cook for hours. The process is the transformation. You cannot rush it without losing exactly what makes it valuable. Some things don't just survive time, they require it. They are built by it. Now let's go beyond business, because for many people, the question isn't just about when to start, it's about whether to restart. Nelson Mandela was 44 years old when he was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964. 44, a trained attorney, a visionary, an activist with a vision for his country so powerful the state found it threatening enough to bury him for decades, literally. He spent 27 years on Robben Island. 27 years. Let that number settle before you move on. Really let it land. He entered prison in the prime of his adult life, focused, burning with purpose, ready to change the world on his own timeline. He emerged in his mid-70s, older than most people are when they begin slowing down, not speeding up, slowing down. And yet, virtually everything the world knows and celebrates about Nelson Mandela happened after those 27 years. His presidency, his dismantling of apartheid, all of it. His global moral authority, the reconciliation he helped architect for an entire nation, every defining achievement built after the interruption, not before. He didn't just survive the interruption, he was shaped by it. The man who walked out was not the man who walked in. The forced stillness, the long years of study and reflection, the confrontation with the deepest limits of human endurance produced something rare, something that youth and freedom alone never could have built. No shortcut leads there, no accelerator program, no Series A, only time and fire. His most powerful chapter was written in his final decades. That is not a footnote tucked at the end. That is the entire story. Here's what this all points to, and this is the part that requires you to genuinely sit with it. Don't rush past this. The years you think you've wasted, the detours, the failed attempts, the long periods of uncertainty, they are not lost time. They are raw material. The slow accumulation of pattern recognition, emotional resilience, and self-knowledge that most people never stop to value. At some point, that accumulation becomes the exact foundation you need to build something that actually lasts. Not a flash, a foundation. The problem isn't that you started late. The problem is that you're measuring yourself against a timeline designed to sell you something. Courses, content, the anxiety-driven attention that keeps people endlessly clicking, scrolling, comparing, and never quite feeling like enough. That is the product. The real timeline looks different. It looks like a person in their 50s who finally knows what they're genuinely good at, who they can trust, what actually matters, no longer burning energy performing ambition for an audience that was never really watching anyway. That person, steady, experienced, unbothered, is often far more dangerous, in the best sense of the word, than any 25-year-old prodigy. If you're 30 and reading this, stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting to feel ready. The readiness comes from starting, not before it. Start now. Understand that the work you do in the next 20 years will compound in ways you cannot yet see or imagine. If you're 50 and reading this, the actuarial table of meaningful contribution has far more room than culture wants you to believe exists. The question is not whether it's too late. The question is whether you are willing to begin. That's the only question that matters. Here is the most uncomfortable truth in everything we've covered today. The people who never start, they are not victims of bad timing. Who spend their 40s waiting to feel ready, their 50s mourning the chances they didn't take, their 60s telling themselves the window has closed. They are not victims of bad timing. They are victims of a story about when success is supposed to happen, what success is supposed to look like, and who it's supposed to happen to. A story handed to them and never questioned. That story is wrong, and you now have enough evidence, real evidence, documented evidence, to stop believing it. Permission granted. Stop now. The farmer who plants in summer doesn't curse the calendar. He doesn't mourn the spring. He works with the season he has. Each season grows something different, not better or worse, different. Each one carries its own unique conditions, its own specific kind of yield, and the harvest from older, deeper soil that's been turned and tested and enriched by decades of lived experience, is special. It is often the most nourishing harvest of all, not despite the time it took to develop, precisely because of that time. You are not behind. You are exactly where the work you've done has brought you. That is not a consolation. That is a fact. The next chapter isn't written yet. No one has written it. No algorithm has predicted it. No timeline has already decided it for you. Go write it. The next chapter is yours, unscripted, unscheduled, and completely wide open. It begins the moment you decide to start.